Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Spot, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I am Bruce.
This is our 6th season. Wow!
It's funny, I gotta say, just real quick, we're on our 6th season. I feel like a British TV show. Because, U.S. television, a season is a year.
Yeah.
They do way too many episodes, but they're done. And then the next season is season 2, it's the next year. Whereas the British TV shows don't tend to do that. Or at least if they do like 3 episodes or 8 episodes. And that's all you get for until they're ready to make more. But
yeah.
So
yeah.
I like the way our setup is.
British TV usually ends after like 3 seasons too. So maybe we should stop.
No, okay.
But this episode is our MPL episode, our multiplayer limited episode. I thought you were gonna kick out of that one. We wanted to take this season to really emphasize that we are not just a Commander podcast. We talk a lot about Commander because it's the main thing we play, but we want to take this season to talk about multiplayer in general because that's our digs. Commander just falls in that. So today we want to talk about multiplayer limited, from Conspiracy to Conspiracy 2.
Yes. I guess with Conspiracy now, I guess we call that old school now?
Oh, wow.
Oh.
I mean, everything's old to me. We also got Battlebond, Commander Legends. We'll talk a little bit about boxing leagues. We thought it would be fun to really challenge ourselves to really emphasize our love for multiplayer by starting with multiplayer limited.
Yes.
As an umbrella. Protect us from this rain. I don't have anything written in my book. I don't know why I opened it.
We're flying free.
Flying free. You know what? Let's just get into it.
Yep.
Conspiracy. 1.
Yes.
Conspiracy.
So, Conspiracy holds a near and dear place in my heart.
Okay.
I am not a limited player, and I never have been. Not by any stretch of the imagination. The closest I get to limited were our sealed pre-releases, and even there, my decks invariably were never any good.
Same.
I just had a hard time putting this together and making it work. And when you add in the idea of a draft, well, okay, now I have to compete against people who know what they're doing. And if I don't know what I'm doing, my deck is even worse than it would be if I was just playing against or just pulling cards out of a pack and putting the deck together. This wasn't limited, has never been my bag, but
having 3 opponents changes things.
Then Conspiracy came along, and suddenly, exactly. Now you've got 3 opponents.
Who also have 3 opponents.
Right. So the game changes. Suddenly, you don't have to have the best deck, or the best deck doesn't necessarily win every time, because there are 3 other opponents who are also looking at this person who has the best deck and saying, yeah, all 3 of us together are going to take this guy down. Mm-hmm. And that can happen. So when my group heard that Conspiracy was coming, we got excited because this was half of a format we were already doing anyway. We were already doing some cube drafts, but most of those were one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And now suddenly we were being offered a draft format for casual players. I'm like, okay, well, this couldn't have landed any better for me. And then sure enough, we bought a ton of it, my play group, and we played a ton of it.
Yeah.
That went on for a good 1.5 years, 2 years, where we were drafting.
Oh wow!
At least once a month, sometimes twice a month, and oftentimes it was more than one draft in a night. Just
new boxes, or are you just shuffling up?
No, new boxes.
Wow.
I bought more Conspiracy than I have bought any other set. I bought at least, oh boy, I don't remember now. I think I bought almost a dozen boxes of it.
Oh wow.
Because in the end, out of everybody in our group, I think we had 18 boxes of Conspiracy that we ended up with, that we worked our way through. So
amazing. And for those unfamiliar, Conspiracy is a draftable limited format where draft matters, I guess, format, where at the end of your draft you will break up into pods of 4.
Yes.
I've never played. Came out in 2014. That's all I got for you.
You draft in a standard draft pod, a draft pod of 8.
Okay.
And what happens then is that you break into 2 groups of 4. How you chose to do that was up to you. I know that some groups simply chose every second person around the table and said those are the people that are in one pod and then the other pod. Our group, we regularly just drew lots. So you didn't know if the person you were handing cards to was going to be in your pod or not. So you just, we throw 4 islands and 4 swamps in the middle and divvy everybody up that way. Just, whatever option you chose. I know that some groups even set it up so they would have 4 players on one side and 4 players on the other. So literally it would go around 1, 2, 3, 4, all in the same pod. I think that's insane, but
I think that makes a little bit more sense, though.
To each his own.
Yeah.
However you wanted to set it up.
Because in the ideal, quote unquote, ideal draft scenario, the person sitting directly across from you is generally going to be drafting a similar deck to you.
Right. The concern is that if you put 4 people in a row, that the person who's sitting at the front of that 4 for 2 of the 3 drafts is going to see all the good cards first. So it can put a swing on things. But again, you're breaking into 2 groups of 4, so you can do that. It works. What I really liked with Battlebond is with Conspiracy. Thank you. Is that
Bruce is excited.
The balance in the cards and in the colors and in the draft options was there. So it wasn't as though, this deck wins all the time, draft this deck. It wasn't that. It was a relatively even spread of various draft types. So that worked out really well. So it kept things very fun. So
and like, when were the first? This is going to be a slight tangent. When were the first Commander precons?
2010.
Oh, okay. So this is like
2012.
This is perfect then, because it's like a few years into Wizards thinking about multiplayer.
Yes.
And making cards that are like, each opponent, each player, like it's more than just one-on-one. They're really embracing the idea that you're playing with more than one opponent.
Right. And Wizards really knew at that point. I mean, just look at some of the cards that come out of Conspiracy, and there are some fun legendary creatures in this set. And yes, I'm biased because I've made commanders out of a big chunk of them. But
Grenzo, you got King Brago, you got
Queen
Marchesa.
You've got Marchesa the Black Rose, and I've made an online version of what's the blue legend?
Mizio.
There we go. There were several that I put together. It doesn't hurt when you've drafted that many times. You have a lot of these cards, so you tend to build with them. But it really, to me, the power balance that you saw in Conspiracy was what I would consider a great balance for your commanders. These were not overpowered, but they did weird and funky stuff. They were fun, and it was these were fun options to go for. So, and I think that nowadays they're probably significantly underpowered, but You're just going to need to build the right deck
Yeah.
around it. But I'm not here to talk about Commander decks. I wanted to focus on this. To me, one of the key things that Conspiracy brings are the Conspiracy cards themselves. Wizards took a look at this and said, these are casual players. Let's do something with the draft other than have people pick up a pack of cards, pick out the one they want, and pass it over.
Yeah.
And just sit there like deaf mutes as the cards go round and around the table. So they added to it. And the Conspiracy cards there was one in every pack, to the annoyance of many people who just wanted the cards and didn't want to do the drafting. Because they're pretty much useless outside of the draft. During the draft, you could pick one. Some of the cards were face up, some of them were face down. You got benefits. They could twist the entire deck.
Yeah.
So,
This is a common one.
Yeah.
Assemble the rank and file. Type line Conspiracy. The text says hidden agenda. Start the game with this conspiracy face down in the command zone and secretly name a card. You may turn this conspiracy face up anytime and reveal a chosen name. And then the rest of the text says creatures you control with the chosen name have, when this creature dies, you may pay black. If you do, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield tapped. So generally, it's like a...
Well, a card like that just looked at it and said, you know what? In a lot of drafts, people pick up a lot of chaff at the end of the draft that they never put in a deck. Well, this one says, you know what? If you end up getting 3 copies of this particular card, put them all in the deck, and then when they die, you get a bonus. So it makes it adds a little value to those cards. And these are, like, a lot of the conspiracies were low-key like that one. Mm-hmm. And then there were other ones that were, one of the ones in particular was, all of your creatures do damage equal to their power instead of their toughness.
Ooh.
So you could completely flip it. Essentially it was Doran as a conspiracy.
Oh, it does it equal to the toughness rather than the power. Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And then there were other weird ones. I'm not going to try and pull them from my head because there were a number of conspiracies in Conspiracy 2, so I'll probably end up confusing a handful of them just because, there was one that your lands tap for any color.
Ooh.
But I forget what the restriction was. 5 cards in hand, or you had to build a 5-color deck or something along that line.
Interesting.
It was all kinds of weirdness. But there were some amazing ones and some that were more common that you would run into.
And these conspiracies, these cards, lived outside of the battlefield. So they were not really interactable. They generally felt more like
an emblem.
Like an emblem. Thank you.
Just because you don't see too many cards that say target, destroy target conspiracy or agenda or whatever.
Yeah.
So they're just sort of there.
Yeah. So you're really only going to see these within the context of a conspiracy draft.
Yeah.
They always kind of added fun flavor. I think along the same lines too, you had cards like Paliano, High City, where on the card it had a general draft line where it was like, during the draft, if you draft this card, ask the person to your left a thing, ask the person to your right a thing. So like with Palianos, ask them for a color, and then you would also choose a color,
right? And
then it could tap for any of those 3 colors.
Yeah, and there was that same concept on a black removal spell. Mm-hmm. So it would say target, and then those 3 colors. Or a creature with one of those 3 colors dies. Yeah,
I think it was like one black instant.
It was a really good card.
Regicide, that's what it was. Good card.
Yeah, but they did all these things to try and make the draft more relevant, or to try and affect the value of the cards in the draft. Garbage Fire, I think, was another one.
And again, we may be confusing some of these with Conspiracy too, but I don't.
Could be, but
honestly,
I think Garbage Fire was from the original.
Yeah, I think
just the idea
Regicide might be from
it would do damage equal to the number of cards that had been drafted that round.
Oh,
so it costs 3, so you certainly didn't want to take it in your first 3 turns. But if you could get one much later, I got one at one point where it was doing 7 damage. And the nice part is that when the next Garbage Fire comes out, if you pick that as your second pick, it still does 7 damage because it just looks at all the garbage fires and says which one gets the most, deals the most.
Oh, wow.
And then they all get that. So suddenly, every other garbage fire at that point, everybody at the table knows that you have it and that it's worth X to you. But for the rest of them, the value changes. So the guy who's picking right in front of you, is he going to take the garbage fire and only get 3? Or is he going to pass it to you and let you get another garbage fire that's worth 7 damage? It's just all sorts of little things that made the draft play in a certain way. One of my favorite cards as far as affecting the draft was is it Deal Broker or Lore Broker? I think it's Deal Broker. It's an artifact creature. The power and toughness are irrelevant because the creature says you can tap it and you draw a card and discard a card.
So it's an artifact creature construct.
Yes.
It says draft Deal Broker face up.
Yeah.
Immediately after the draft, you may reveal a card in your card pool. Each other player may offer you 1 card in their card pool in exchange. You may accept any one offer.
Right. So if you're offering up you offer something that's not in the colors that you're running, and maybe somebody else will swap you. And that's cute.
And that creates a lot of interesting dynamics too, if you already know who's in your pod and how much they're willing to give up for it.
Right. But part of the reason I really like Deal Broker is when you're doing the draft and you see how it affects the draft and what it's going to do at the end of the draft, that's how you tend to value the card. But you forget, it's a 1/3 creature that lets you loot. Forget about all of the draft relevant stuff.
Yeah.
That by itself is good. And that's part of the reason Deal Broker sits in a number of my decks.
In fact, it's a 2/3 for 3.
Okay, it's a 2/3 for 3. So it goes into a number of my decks because it draws you cards and it's colorless.
Right.
So it helps with, your non-blue, non-green colors.
Yeah. Gets rid of lands late game.
Right. And it's funny because most people don't put it in their deck because they start reading it and saying, oh, this has something to do with a draft. I'm not doing a draft. And they don't look at the card. But, it's great in a draft and it's even better. Well, it's great in a draft and it's pretty darn good outside of a draft too. And there's a handful of cards from Conspiracy and Conspiracy 2 where they alter the draft, but they're still good outside of the draft. And you can expand that out. You talked about Paliano, and I've used Paliano in a commander deck. We just errated it so that at the start of the game, before you reveal your commander, opponents on your right and your left choose 2 colors, and then the 3 of you choose colors, and that land now produces those 3 colors. The question is, are those 3 colors part of the colors that your commander needs? So it's another little game that you get to play during Conspiracy, but it also helps in your regular commander games.
Before we fully involve ourselves in Conspiracy 2, Conspiracy 1 also brought Dethrone.
Yes.
I believe that might have been the first sighting of the mechanic. Dethrone essentially says if a creature attacks the player with the most life, it gets +1/+1 counter.
Yeah, most or tied. So you can go after, if everybody's starting life total is 20, you can go after anybody.
Yeah. So it does a few great things that aren't done enough in Commander anyway, or in a lot of Magic games, which is it encourages combat.
Yeah.
Combat is generally not as valued as it should be.
Right.
So it encourages that, which we'll see again in Conspiracy 2.
Right. This was Wizards' first attempt
to
try and make the combat step a little more valuable, a little more valued.
Especially in multiplayer, where it's tough to be like, oh, I'm going to attack this person, while still being sure that you're not going to get attacked from any of the other players.
Right. Dethrone was, like I say, it was an early attempt. It didn't work quite as well as they'd hoped it would, just because, one, it encouraged you to attack the person with the highest life total, not necessarily the most dangerous person. And two, a lot of people would forget that the +1/+1 counter gets added before combat is dealt, before any combat damage is dealt. So, they look at their 2/2 with the throne, and they see the opponent's 2/2, and they're like, I don't want to trade.
Right.
Well, you're not gonna, because your creature's gonna be a 3/3 when you swing in.
Yeah.
For the most part nowadays, Dethrone is pretty much a Marchesa of the Black Rose deck.
Yeah.
Because you're just looking for ways to add +1 counter things on things with that deck. But
Conspiracy 2 kind of split up Dethrone into, two of Commander's favorite mechanics.
Yeah.
Some of the best design that I can think of in Monarch, which we'll talk a lot about in Commander Legends, and Goad, which has just continually gotten more and more printings in cards since, I don't know, like last year or something.
Yeah. For me, Conspiracy 2, really enjoyed that draft format as well. But Conspiracy to me was about the conspiracies and about everything else. Conspiracy 2 really tied in, like the focus really is, at least for me, it's the Monarch and Goad. Those two abilities are just, they play a very significant role in my Commander games now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I think they're both mechanics that,
even outside of Commander games.
Yeah, I think as they continually make more and more of these cards that have these mechanics, it's great, honestly, having this choice, because I feel like even just a year ago, or I guess a year and a half ago, just before Commander Legends came out,
right,
I was looking for Goad cards, and you'd had like 3. It was like Grenzo, Disrupt Decorum, and like another one that were like any sort of good.
Right.
And then you got things like Bloodthirsty Blade and the Impetus cycle. And we see more and more as things go.
Word got out to Wizards that
it was a good mechanic.
Goad is a great mechanic, and you need to do more with it. And there is so much more that you could do with it. They really did just sort of barely scrape the surface of what Goad can do.
Absolutely.
In Conspiracy 2.
And I think the thing with Goad, for me, is that it's not terribly overpowered, or at least I haven't seen it be that way.
Yeah.
I know that probably people are out there being like, oh, like it's terrible, it's a scourge on the format, but like I haven't seen it yet. Not to say that it
right.
is.
And this really ties into the whole idea that when we talked about the Throne, how they're trying to make the combat step more relevant. Goad and the Monarch, both. It says something when a lot of play groups have their own default rule that the first person to do combat damage becomes the Monarch. That you don't even need to play the Monarch card. You don't even need to play any Monarch cards to get the Monarch, because they feel like this is such a good part.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Of it. And if you're adding in more card draws, you're adding in more cards. It stands to reason that your games are going to be more interesting and more exciting if everybody's drawing more cards. So
for those unfamiliar, Goad says until your next turn, that creature that has been goaded attacks each combat if able, and attacks a player other than you if able. So if you have goaded, say I have goaded Bruce's creature, Bruce's creature that I have goaded cannot attack me, but has to attack, kind of. If it can't attack, it doesn't have to attack. If it can only attack me, it must attack me.
Yeah. The attack part is the greater requirement of the two.
What I like about Goad is that it puts the emphasis on combat, and not necessarily to value combat, but as a response. So like the more ubiquity that Goad sees in the format, your playgroup or your meta will respond accordingly. So like the more Goad is out there, the more people will value combat. So like if you just have a bunch of crappy creatures because of just their ETBs, then maybe once you start to see goad more, you will put in bigger creatures, tougher creatures, etc.
Right.
To then be okay attacking. It will value combat before the mechanic itself. And then with Monarch, kind of linking with Dethrone, for those unfamiliar, which shouldn't be too many of you, Monarch is the best.
Be careful you read the correct text on the Monarch, and not the incorrect text that was printed on it when it was originally printed.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. That's if you're Monarch. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, its controller becomes the Monarch.
Yeah.
So it's combat damage. If you're the Monarch, at the beginning of your end step, you draw a card. So if you draw a card and then now you have 8, you then have to discard. Discarding cards, 2 hand size is always the last thing you do before passing a turn.
Yeah. Yeah, the Monarch never goes... Once it's in, it does not go away. So there's always... As long as there are still 2 players left, at least one of them is going to be the Monarch.
So it's just another reason to start attacking people. The return of the Monarch in Commander Legends was so sweet.
Conspiracy 2, I think, continued the theme of great legendary creatures.
Another Grenzo, another Marchesa.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I feel like it definitely added something to that whole plane.
I hope we see it again.
I can't believe we won't.
Right.
I think there are... It offers up too many options where those options just aren't anywhere else. If they've got other ideas for ways to mess with the draft, you can throw them in there, and you can't really do it anywhere else, including with the next one we're going to talk about after the break. But I can't see how we won't see it again. I think it could take a little bit of time, but we'll get there.
I find it interesting too, because Conspiracy 2 I believe was my first draft format. The first time I ever drafted was Conspiracy 2, and I think by that point you guys were starting to peter off on Conspiracy 2. I think at that point you guys had quote unquote solved the draft, and I had no idea what I was doing, and by the time the draft was done, the games were, nobody was super interested, but I was like, yeah, let's play, and I got smoked because I'm not great at drafting still.
Right.
But it was such a quality experience to just like sit here and just like have 8 people sitting around just talking and
the whole
drafting. And
a common theme you hear in Magic is that you really don't want to be cracking your packs unless you're cracking them for a draft. And there were few drafts that I enjoyed more than cracking a Conspiracy or a Conspiracy 2 pack to go with that deck or to go with that format. So
speaking of not cracking your packs for value, let's throw it to our break to buy singles. No, I'm just kidding. We don't actually have a real sponsor. We'll be right back.
This episode of Temple of the False Pod is brought to you by Sovereign's Realm, a conspiracy that reads, your deck can't have basic land cards, and your starting hand size is 5. Exile a card from your hand. This turn, you may play basic land cards from outside the game. Basic lands you control have tap. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Enjoy that draft deck.
Now back to you. Hey, we're back. Thanks me and Bruce for that beautiful read. It was very sumptuous and tactile. It's so interesting. I've drafted plenty of times on Arena, and there's never quite the experience that you get when you're drafting in person.
Right.
You know, obviously. If you're doing it for the game, then fine, great. Yeah, it does its job. But there's such a communal experience, even in competitive drafting, doing it in person with the tactile nature of cards and sitting across from somebody. And of course, with the past 2 years, there's been this lack of that.
And it's really hard to draft Conspiracy anywhere else other than in person.
Oh, yeah.
Because you need sticky notes. Sometimes you need to actually write on the card. The tactile part of it really is a part of the Conspiracy draft.
And it's even harder with the next multiplayer limited format that Wizards came up with, which centered around Two-Headed Giant, which for those who don't know, Two-Headed Giant is a format. We might have talked about it in our multiplayer format episode where we talked about Star and Secret Ninja. I don't remember what it was called. Secret Emperor. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah.
All those things. Two-Headed Giant. You're on a team of 2 against generally another team of 2. You can see your team's cards. You attack as a team. You get attacked as a team.
Yeah.
You have a combined life total?
Yes.
30. And you kind of do everything together. You talk about strategies, etc. So they turn that into a draft format called Battlebond, where you draft with your partner, and each pick you pick 2, which then also helped out with partner as a concept.
Partner with.
Right. Where they introduced partner with. So you could play a partner with card, and then somebody on your team could go search for the other one if it was in their deck. So either you or them could search for the other card, or I guess it wasn't even search. It was like, go find it. Because it specifically can get around things like Aven Mind Sensor. That type of like, if search for search.
Okay.
Great little utility. We got cool things like Okum and Zinder Split, the coin flipping deck. We got things like
Toothy and Pier. We got the partner commanders. There were a few other ones. There was Gorm and...
Oh, yeah, Gorm the Virulent or something. And then we had, of course, the introduction of the two beautiful king children.
It was Gorm the Great and Virtus the Veiled.
There
were several of them.
Yeah, and then, of course, the red-blue were the beautiful children of King Kenrith, Will and Rowan Kenrith.
Yes.
Who, I mean, lore-wise, were, like, brought there and told to gladiate. Some fun little things. Other than that, I think just, like, as a Two-Headed Giant draft format, that was something completely new. And it was, like, my second draft format, and it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts.
It is. For me, Battlebond, following up with the conspiracies, I was initially kind of negative with Battlebond, but that was primarily because of the restriction that it had, in that you needed 8 people for the draft, or 4. You could do a draft with just the 4 of you. So either you and your partner were picking the card, or your opponents were getting that card. So you could do it like that. Ideally, you did want 8 people to draft. The benefit that Conspiracy and Conspiracy 2 both had is you could draft with 7. You just had a pod of 4 and a pod of 3. You could draft with 6, 2, 3 pods.
You could do 5.
You could do 5 as a single pod. Yeah. You could do 4. But it gave you all of the options. So, you know, on Thursday night when I'm waiting for people to show up, you're literally counting off and just waiting to get to 4. Because once you got to 4, you knew you could draft. And that was it for the rest of the night. But if you wanted to do Battlebond,
you needed 8.
You needed 4. And then when the 5th person showed up, well, okay, now I need 3 more. and it got hard. It was difficult to draft it as much as the conspiracy was, just because of that restriction. However, Battlebond is a great set. I didn't get to draft it as much as conspiracy, but I did get to draft it a fair bit. And to me, the benefit of Battlebond was just the learning experience. So much so, it's a treat to be able to sit next to people that you play with all the time, or even people you don't know, and see how they see the cards. Why do they think this card is the card you should pick? Why do you think that this is the card that you should pick? And you can have at least a mini discussion over each. And a lot of times your view on a particular card, or just how to be drafting overall, can be changed or enlightened, or
absolutely,
or you can be assisting the other person. Maybe when they looked at the card, they were like, yeah, and then you say, well, but it says all players, and then they go, what? And they look at it and they're like, oh, that's right,
that includes my team,
right? So there's all kinds of benefits, and it really tied into that whole working together motif to make it happen.
I watched so many people on Twitch draft, whatever's on Arena, and it's so wonderful to have that learning experience of like watching other people draft, because when you're drafting, you don't have that experience. You don't learn why certain picks are right and why some are wrong, except for the fact that like you're going into these games and being like, oh well, this card didn't work the way I wanted it to. But the thing with Battlebond is that you get both that experience of like having somebody confirm or deny your pick and be like, oh, like you get the watching, but you also get to be watched.
Exactly. It's not a one-way street. You're not just learning or just sitting there saying you're an idiot. I
am, but
you are watching, or you are actually involved with the draft, and you're part of the selection. It's just such a learning experience. My favorite Battlebond draft, and it's just not even close, was at a Gen Con, and a group of my friends, and we managed to round up 3 folks from Wizards of the Coast. So we had Aaron Forsyth, Mark Globus, and Gavin Verhey in our pod, and of course we split them up. And I was lucky. Well, and they were my cards. I got to pick my partner first, so I picked Aaron Forsyth, and I learned more in that draft than anywhere. Essentially, Aaron was picking cards, and occasionally I would pipe up with, "This is a multiplayer format. What about this one?" And he would look at it and think about it, knowing that he was going to be facing 2 opponents instead of just one, and then make a slightly better decision. But most of the time it was, yeah, I think this one is still the better call. And I had a great time. It was, like I said, it was a learning experience, and we got to put together a good deck. And on top of that, it wasn't even just the draft; it was the play. There were plenty of times when I was like, we should swing, but then this happens. Like, good point. And because he's a far better Magic player than I am, so it was nice to get that opportunity. So
yeah, but he learned something as well.
Yeah, that people can play Magic for a really long time and still be lousy drafters.
Yeah, well, when it's your job, maybe it's your job to be good at the game. So not us. And on top of it, I mean, Battlebond brought us what's that mechanic? Assist.
Yes.
So assist was cool. Granted, I have never seen it happen in a game of Commander.
I have managed to make it happen a couple of times.
Okay.
But it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, getting an assist on a counter spell, it's a tough
sell.
Because usually either the assist isn't enough, you still can't counter, or you have the mana you just don't want to spend it. So then you're like, I can counter this, but you're going to have to pay because I want to keep this up in case of what?
Right.
In case you do something to me. So quite often people won't help. But
yeah. So assist, for those who don't know, is just like, I'm not going to look it up, but it's generally a mechanic where other people can help you pay for something. But the weird thing is that it's just the spell costs more. So like just use a better spell. The more I think about it, it feels like a precursor to Demonstrate from Strixhaven, where it's like if you cast it for less, somebody else Demonstrate is if you can copy it again to let somebody else also have a copy. Or there's that like weird mechanic from Strixhaven where it's like if you do it less, if you pay less for it, it feels like a predecessor to that. If you pay less, it does like something else. I mean, even more so, it started a cycle of lands that, I mean, a wise man once told me are almost indistinguishable from the original duels, which are essentially, I think they're deemed the crowd lands now, where it says it comes in untapped if you have 2 or more opponents. So if you are in a point in the game where there are 3 or 4 people in the game, they come in untapped, which is great.
Is just spectacular.
Oh, absolutely.
The only downside to the crowd lands, the only one is that
they're not searchable.
They're not searchable.
Yeah.
They don't list the basic land types in their line. I'm okay with that. I am okay with that.
I don't have really many fetches. I mean,
yeah, right. If you're not running fetches, then
you've got the panoramas, you've got Farseek, and that's kind of it. Like there's like a few old sorcery and enchantments, but
yeah, I think they're like crop rotation will let you find a non-basic as well.
Gaia's bounty.
I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about searching them out. This is a great card, and let's keep in mind. You can also, when you're not playing Commander, in just your 60 card casual formats, you can run 4 of these in a deck, and suddenly the need to search fades quickly because you have 4 of them. You're going to get one, and you can just play it out. I love these cards. They are slowly but steadily going up in value.
Oh yes,
and if you do not have, get 4 of each. Get it. Do it quick. They will get reprinted, but who knows how long that will take.
I think they're at about 10 now-ish.
Right.
And so we saw 5 of them. I think they were the ally colors in Battlebond. And then we finish off the cycle with the other 5 in Commander Legends.
Yes.
Commander Legends is a draft matters, I guess less of a draft matters format, and just a draft format where you would start with a 20 card booster pack.
Yeah.
Or 3 of them. Draft normally, except you would take 2 each. No, you just take 1. I don't remember. There was a legend in each pack. How many ever you took, I drafted it once. It was fun. You might have taken 2. I don't remember. Anyway,
I think you take 2.
If you're starting out with 20 cards, you think you'd have to take 2. Otherwise, it takes forever because you've got 20 cards in your booster. Anyway, then I think there wasn't the singleton rule in your deck building, but there was color identity rule. It was a great set. I loved it because it finished off the cycle of the 5 or of the 10 duels possible for this idea of if you have 2 or more opponents, it comes in non-tapped. And beyond that, it also just ramped up in reprints of certain staples that started to get a little pricier. We had
absolutely.
Lightning Greaves was starting to get to be like $10, and now it's like dropped back down a little. It's starting to go back up,
right.
But it's that cycle. now we have an overabundance of arcane signets. We've got overabundance of soul rings. We've got overabundance of command towers. Commander staples.
Yeah.
We're really seeing reprints here. We saw the return of partner as a mechanic outside of commander products like commander decks, precons.
Right.
Which was fun, interesting. They were a little powered down, which I'm glad that they learned after Thrasios and Timna and all these
right. To me,
wild ones.
They power them down. So if you have one of the wild ones, I like the idea that they did single color ones that have very minimal effect, because it means that crazy one essentially now gets that color that you always wanted to add to it. Because it's like, oh, I really wish that Timna the Weaver that there was red in it, because think of all of the cards you could include. So then you just pick out like
Rograk or Breaches or
exactly. So you get some benefit,
right? But
it's not huge, and it's just beautiful. I really like the way it was set up, and I still like the idea. I like the idea of the commander deck that they want you to create. It's a 60 card deck. It has a commander. You can use multiple copies of a card as long as you've drafted it.
Right.
And it's 60 cards. I appreciate that this is practically a brawl deck and that most people don't care for brawl. I love the idea of 60 card commander decks. I also know that Oathbreaker exists.
Right.
But
I think what's so great about this is that it is 60 card. Sure, it's a smaller life total, but like it is like it's supposed to be like a quick thing rather than like sitting down with the commander that you've thought about for months and like you've played over and over and over again. It's this fresh take, and it is like Brawl, sure, but like with Brawl, it's Brawl standard, which is it's not my cup of tea. It's fine,
right?
But it's funny with historic Brawl on Arena, it's now 100 cards. But, you're working with the same pool that everybody at the table is. Yeah. So regardless of, the money you've spent on your staples and your, ad nauseums or whatever.
Right.
Not that we'd see that here, but you're starting with generally the same pool. So you're really relying on your skills as a player rather than your wallet or your access to cards.
Yeah.
So your power level, as I've been saying all along, isn't about the cards in your deck. It's how you play them and how you draft them.
Right.
Because I think there was a while where, people were like, oh, what do you talk about in your pregame discussions? And overwhelmingly it was like, oh, like, what are the standout cards in your deck, or how does your deck win? And it's like, sure, those are important. Those are important to know going into a game to generally feel out how things are going to go, or if you even want to sit down with these people.
Right.
But as a player, I find it important to kind of look at these things of like, oh, well, like I have this card in my hand, but do I want to play it even though it is the optimal thing? Or do I want to, whatever? And it kind of, this format specifically requires you to like kind of look at Commander as like, how does it affect, or how does it fit into my deck, rather than like, 5-color good stuff is a thing out there that you just slot in any 5-color commander or generally any 5-color commander, and it just works. And that kind of is the way things are as you go up in number of colors in your deck.
Right.
So like good stuff decks are boring because they all end up being the same thing. But this requires you to look at what you have already drafted, how your cards that you are drafting interact with it.
How are they working?
How are they working in conjunction with each other, and how will they work against your opponent's decks? And that's like really what I love about this, is that like you're working on the same level. The only difference is how you look at Lightning Greaves in this non-artifact based deck,
right,
versus how I look at it. And it is this nice balance of like, we can keep this as casual as we want.
Yeah.
The one draft I had a lot of I lucked out. I chose my commanders very late. I think it's toward the end of pack 2 I finally found my 2 commanders, and it ended up being red blue pirates. It was Breaches and Malcolm, and I was really forcing pirates, which, I mean, if anybody drafts out there, you shouldn't force things, but there's a lot of support for pirates in this format, and I mean, I love my pirates. So I was overjoyed when I found any red legendary and any blue legendary, and then finally I found Breaches and Malcolm.
Yeah.
And when I sat down to play the game, it was clear that like nobody knew who to go for. Nobody knew what, like,
right.
There was
You don't know what's in the deck.
Yeah, there's no preconception of like, oh, this person builds these decks that are so high powered and so tough. Like, we got to go for this person immediately. We sat down, we started the game, and the fact that Monarch saw this like huge uptick in this format, made it amazing. You could play a card while somebody else was Monarch that made you Monarch without even having to attack them.
Yeah.
And then, you got to choose, like, do I try to take this person out, or do I attack the Monarch to get the Monarch, to get that extra draw? And you really play with your greed versus skill, and, like, it made for really interesting gameplay.
Right.
It's a beautiful, beautiful format.
Yeah. The only piece to add to that is with Monarch and Goad, we saw Commander Legends take that up a notch. That's more than one. The Monarch cards that came out of there, it wasn't simply you are the Monarch, or a way to attack somebody who is the Monarch. It became if you're the Monarch, you get an extra benefit. If you're not the Monarch, you get a benefit or a negative or whatever. It really looked at that the space that you can, the build space that Monarch offers, and went into it, and I love that. If you're adding another, it's adding another reason for people to swing, and I'm all in favor of that. And we saw a lot more Goad cards come out, and they weren't trashy. These were good. This is good stuff. I mean,
I feel like they really took the idea of Monarch, and they've been doing this a lot with Mechanic lately, where it's not just one note. So like, like you were saying with Monarch, it was, if you're the Monarch at the beginning of your upkeep, with the court cycle, if you're the do this thing. If you're the Monarch, it does it more, etc.
Yeah.
They did the same thing with food, where it was like, you can tap and sack this for 3 life. Great. They did it with blood tokens.
Yeah.
You can tap and sack this to loot or whatever.
Right.
But then within the set's mechanic as well, like with the food, you had extra benefits of having food tokens or sacking food tokens. Same with blood. Like, there was flavorful mechanics involved. And they're really hitting their stride with making mechanics multifaceted rather than just it does that one thing.
Right.
And I just really love the attention that they're giving each mechanic rather than just throwing it out there and seeing what sticks.
Right.
And they're bringing back beloved mechanics, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I had mentioned we were going to talk about boxing leagues. We don't have much time, but I mean, Boxing League is another limited format. Really kind of saw a surge and kind of the creation during the pandemic where people couldn't draft. So they would get a box and then use that as their sealed pool for a commander deck.
Right. And that was the original.
Right.
There was a format where you bought a box, you built a commander from that box, or you built a sealed deck. So you built a 40 card sealed deck from an entire box. Oof. And then you would play. And of course, it doesn't play like a sealed deck, it plays like a constructed deck. And people love that idea. And then it was taken a step further with the Boxing League, where you would build your commander deck with one box of cards. And then after a couple of games, you'd add another box to the mix. So your card pool just doubled in size. And now you can mess with that and, remake your commander or edit the commander that you have or go with a whole new one or however you wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And it was great fun and spectacular and quite honestly a format for people who have more money
Oh
than
yeah,
I do.
definitely. There's definitely like a step there in accessibility. I mean, we were part of one where it was like we started with 6.
We started with packs instead of boxes with the idea that we would eventually ramp up to several packs. But
I mean,
the idea is you're balancing the card pool. There are going to be cards that you're just not going to get, and you have to make it work.
Yeah.
So
I'm just like so excited that this season we're really focusing on non-traditional Commander content. We've got some cool ideas for some episodes coming up. We're gonna build a deck. We're gonna talk about very wild things, especially having multiple copies of certain cards that you just generally don't see very often if you're not playing not Commander. And I'm just like, I'm so excited to do some of these exercises where we are like, I'm hoping I'm coming out of this season with a new 60 card deck, because I mean, I built the Tressorhorn deck that we did a couple seasons ago, and it's fun. It does its thing. But
it would be nice to have more than one deck.
Yeah. Oh man, the amount of times that Tainted Strike has saved my life has been amazing.
Yeah.
Somebody comes in for 8 damage, and
it's supposed to be the finisher, not the saving.
Yeah. I Tainted Strike it, and now I have 9 poison counters, but nobody else is dealing with Infect, so I just saved myself 8 damage.
Free swing. Yeah.
But like I'm so excited to just like kind of sit back, talk about the ideas behind what kind of comes down when you have 4 people sitting at a table,
right? Rather
than 4 Commander players talking Commander.
And for those of you who are Commander only, don't give up on this.
Oh yeah, no.
Most of these cards will relate to Commander, and even when they don't, just consider what we're looking at. Yeah. And then it's easy enough to port that into your Commander games, into your Commander decks. We're just trying to we're opening up some new options for you.
Yeah. And honestly, whenever we talk about a card, we will almost always just by instinct talk about how it relates to Commander. Mm-hmm. So sit tight. We'll be back next week with another episode of Temple of Falsepod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. Oh man, I have yet to build a deck with 4 temples. Whoa! I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
Have a great night, and may your temple,
your fifth land.
Thank you.
Always be the temple.
Oh. Bye. Oh wow, that was a weird. Swip swap.
Whoops.
Wait. Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com or on Twitter at falsepodmtg. Bruce is at ManaBurned, and I'm at Andy Weekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, like, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your 5th land be the temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!